Marian Mill was born literally in a royal palace in Hungary. Her first utensil was literally a golden spoon. She attended school with anticipation and with a desire to become an actress. And that desire led her to America, specifically to Hollywood. And it was there that things took a horrible turn. There was something about that high-stress, fast-paced life of Hollywood that really caused problems in Marian's life. It led her to abuse alcohol, to abuse drugs, and in fact, on 3 different occasions, she tried to take her own life. And so Marian, in probably one of the wisest decisions she could make, decided to go back home. She arrived back home, and it was sometimes later that there was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Albert Schweitzer who came, and she had opportunity to meet him. Now, something we need to know about Dr. Schweitzer is that he was a well-known medical doctor, philosopher, theologian, and missionary. He was a missionary in Africa, but he was back really on just a leave at that particular time, and that's when Marian met Dr. Schweitzer. When she found out what he did and what his plans were to return, she begged to go with him. And it shocked everybody that knew when he agreed to let her go. And so it came time for his return, and they made their way to Africa. Marian was born in a palace, but she spent the rest of her life in Africa, emptying bedpans, nursing sores of some of the poorest people on the face of the earth. This month, if you noticed in our newsletter, I have entitled this series Home Run Series. What that is I will share with you this month on Sunday mornings 4 of my favorite Bible stories. Specifically, it will be 4 of my favorite outlines. The material of the lessons will be new, but the outlines are some of those that over almost 3 decades of ministry are the ones that I have remembered the most. They have had the greatest impact on me, and I pray that they can for you as well. And if you know anything about me, you know that the idea of Christians being servants is something that's very close to my heart. And so when I ask for volunteers, when I share the needs that we have among our church family, I find great joy in knowing that we serve together. And so I look forward this morning to us opening our Bibles to Mark chapter 9 to look at one of my favorite stories that reminds us of the importance that a disciple of Jesus would be a servant. We again open our Bibles to Mark chapter 9. I want to begin reading in verse 33. They came to Capernaum. While he was in the house, Jesus asked them, "What were you arguing about on the road?" But they kept quiet, because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, "Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and servant of all." He took a little child whom he placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me." Jesus and his disciples spent a lot of time walking. With sandals on their feet, they traveled a lot of dirt roads, whether it was from Galilee or in Samaria or in Judea. This particular story, though, is gathered in the northern part of the area in Galilee. And they're making their way to this town called Capernaum. They arrive at their destination. They arrive at the home where they were intended to stay. And when they got there, they sat down, and Jesus asked them this question: "What were you arguing about on the road? Now, friends, that's not a difficult question, is it? But it is a pointed one. It was intended to spark deep conversation. Now, they were quiet, and I call this silence a silence of shame. It's the shame that you experience when you've been busted. That when someone knows what you've been doing and they were able to see that, you didn't think anybody else necessarily knew or were paying attention. But then there's that one question. I don't have this story in my outline, but it is one of my favorites. I can say it's a favorite because it's now several years ago. But I was a small child, probably around Abby's age, and I had gotten in trouble in school. A shocker to you all, I got in trouble for talking. And so that particular day, the teacher sent me home with the instructions to write sentences. Now, some of you guys that are younger haven't experienced that. Perhaps you should, because it is a great tool to learn. And so I had just a long list. I want to think it was 500 sentences to write. Get home and go to my room and I close the door and I'm just busting it out. And so Mama comes and gets time for supper, eat supper, and I get ready to get up. And Mama's like, wait, what's a hurry? What's your hurry? I've got homework. See, I should have known I was in trouble then because I never did homework at home. But I went back to that room, closed the door, and man, I am just getting it just as hard as I can. And about that time, door opens. Mama says, what you up to? She knew. And I didn't say anything because I was so embarrassed for having gotten in trouble. I never got in trouble. But I sure did that day. I get in trouble for having to write sentences, but boy, then I really got in trouble with Mom and Dad. There's a silence of shame. There's a silence that comes when there's a time when somebody asks a question, and that is exactly what Jesus did. He asked a pointed question. And when he asked that, there was nothing they could say because they knew they were guilty. Now, friends, before we move on from that, I want us to recognize that what the disciples did, this tendency of wanting to determine who's the greatest, you look at that and you want to ask the question, how did the conversation spiral down to that? The closest thing that I can think of takes us back to the beginning of Mark chapter 9, and it's there that Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John to the mountain of transfiguration. And while they were up there, Jesus was transfigured before them. He appeared with Moses and Elijah. They heard the voice of God. This is my beloved Son, whom I love. Listen to him. And then on the way back down, do you remember what Jesus told the three? Don't tell anybody. Not now. And I don't know how that particular incident played into this discussion later on, but I have a feeling that there was something about that event that sparked a conversation that led to just this horrible topic of conversation. Now, again, before we move on to the next part, I need to say this. There is a silence of shame, but there's something about that beginning story of Mark chapter 9. You'll need to go back and read that. I think it's the first 12 verses. But read that for yourself, because I want to also suggest to you that there is a silence of honor. There are times when we say things, that we experience things that we can't say anything because we're ashamed, but then there are other times we can't say anything because it's a matter of character and confidentiality. Jesus looked at Peter, James, and John on the Mount of Transfiguration on the way back down, and he said, don't tell anyone now. I think about a perfect application to modern day church and modern day living. There are times as a friend that someone is going to look to you, a burden on their heart. And when they come to you and they say, I need to talk to you about something, but please don't tell anyone. Friends, you have been asked to keep a silence of honor. Honor that. I look in the church today and I look at leaders, I look at those that serve as teachers, ministers, particularly those who serve as elders. And there are times that elders receive information and confidentiality from members or of difficult things that are going on. There are things that elders know, and I know a lot of you don't agree with this, and I'm just telling you, we've missed the boat. The church is not a democracy, okay? The church is set up with the elders to serve as shepherds. There will be things that elders know about members and circumstances in our congregation that no one else will know. And it is not their responsibility always to keep you informed of all of these other things. They will be called to make difficult decisions and to maintain that silence of honor. And I've watched elders that have tried to do that. They've maintained that character. And boy, they have been browbeaten by members. I've seen members come up in their anger, and they come up and boy, they have chewed out that elder. And there was something about that they found pleasure and they found great satisfaction in that. And all I'm sitting here doing is I'm thinking, you have degraded, do you realize what you've done for the structure, the foundation, and the honor of the church by not trusting your leaders enough, that your leaders at times know more than you have been made aware of. And the best thing that they have done is not made that public, because if the elders had done that, for James and Amy in a circumstance, a situation that involves their family, and we sit here and we don't understand, and boy, we're letting the elders have it about something. I'm going to tell you something. For James and Amy, they would have never had a greater respect for their elders than they did at the time that the shepherds honored that silence of honor. And that makes me want to talk to them, because I've seen how they respect that confidentiality. Church, that's something that we need to look for when we think about leaders. That's something that's a lesson that we find at the beginning of chapter 9 in Mark. And we also realize that silence of shame that would come later in the chapter. All right, let's move on with the story, can we? Mark chapter 9, verse 35. What were you arguing about on the road? That's the question. Mark 9:35, sitting down, Jesus called the 12, and he said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. Man, you talk about a statement worth remembering. If you write down verses on note cards and tape them on the mirror in your home, write this one down and tape it. Remember it. Keep it at the forefront of your mind. It is a lesson of which we constantly need to be reminded in our world today, because this reminds us that service is success. I love what Melvin Newland had to say about this particular statement from Jesus. He said, notice that Jesus did not condemn them or rebuke them for desiring greatness. He did not say that it is wrong to want to be great. He did not say that it is wrong to want to succeed. But what Jesus did was define success. Jesus defined greatness. And that, church, is where rubber meets the road in our society today, because society has misdefined success. I love it. The quote that I have in your outline is actually attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, and we think that's right. There's some dispute about that, but in the outline today, I've given him credit for that, as I have for a number of years. But I love this piece that he shared. What is success? To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. Jesus in this passage tells us that true greatness is measured by helping others and serving others. Now, I think about what that means for us. I think about our young people. I think about as you grow up and as you go to school. And I look at some of these guys down here, and whether it's Ashton and her being involved in swimming, or whether it's Andy and Abby being involved in swimming, whether it's Austin and some artwork, Joey and guys, our children throughout our congregation are doing some great things. And I want you to know that it's good to do that. I want you to know it's good to make good grades. It's good to win the influence of other people. But above all things, as we go about those, remember that our goal is to influence others for Christ. Our goal is to influence others in such a way that they will come to know Jesus. Church, there is no better way that I can think of than to help someone breathe easier in life than to have shared with them the good news of Jesus by the words we speak and by the life we live. Now, the same holds true for us as adults. I believe it's okay to have a good job. I believe it's okay to work hard at that job. I believe it's okay that we try to do things with our family. And many of these activities, those things can be so good and so healthy for us. But above all things, we want to make sure, you know what? I'm living this. I can make sure that my children make all A's. I can have them where they do their very best in athletic activities, or that they have good. I can strive and present opportunities for those things to avail. But if my children grow up and they don't know Jesus, I failed. I look at my life as an adult, any of us that are involved professionally in things, we can strive to be the very best at what we do, to try to achieve greatness in that. But if we do that and we have not influenced a single co-worker for Christ, a single neighbor or a single friend for Christ, then friends, I'm just going to tell you, we didn't succeed. We did a lot of good and we churned a lot of wheel, but we made no traction. We made no progress in life. We need to have a desire to serve others and influence others for Jesus. What that means is, as we go, we strive to help others know Jesus. As we go, we look for opportunities to serve, and we make sure that we seize those moments. Now, Jesus has done a great job here teaching lessons, hasn't he? He asked just the right question in just the right time and in just the right way. What were you arguing about on the road? Jesus said just the right thing at just the right time and in just the right way. If anyone desires to be first, he must be the very last and the servant of all. But then there was one more lesson that he desired to teach. Same lesson in a third different way. And that's where we turn to Mark chapter 9, verse 36. He took a little child whom he placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me." Friends, when we welcome children, we need to understand the task here is greater than our own immediate family. We're not talking about just welcoming our own children, or as the case with many of you, your own grandchildren. Of course we do that. You know what the challenge is going to be? We have it presented to us 2 weeks from tomorrow. The task before us is we will have children throughout this community who will express a desire to come here to be part of Vacation Bible School. And our challenge before us is not to be a respecter of persons, that we want to welcome children. We want to welcome the children that we know the best. We want to welcome children that are complete strangers. We want to welcome the children that know how to say yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, and no sir, and thank you. We want to welcome them, and we want to welcome the child that's never had opportunity for anyone to teach them those lessons of life. We want to welcome those that it's easy to love, and we want to welcome those that, in all fairness, sometimes it's just hard to love. Do not be a respecter of persons, because Jesus says, whenever you welcome any one of these little ones in my name, you welcome me. So we're not going to be a respecter of persons, but a second great lesson before us is to understand that when we start talking about welcoming children, church, it is a great responsibility. I've been in church long enough, I've been a minister long enough, I've watched us bemoan the path that many of our young people have taken. Oh, well, they used to come to church, but they don't come to church anymore. We bemoan and we just sit here and we ache over the fact now that, well, where are the children now? I'm going to tell you this, many of their mamas and daddies are at home today in bed. Many of their mamas and daddies saw absolutely no need to get up early and get their children in Sunday school so that they could be taught great Bible lessons in their own age level. They won't see the need to come back tonight and have those lessons taught, or come back Wednesday night and have those lessons. But man, they don't go into church is some of the farthest things from some people's minds. And their children are the ones that are suffering. And it is a great responsibility that a lot of parents will have to give account not only for their own soul, but also for the soul of their children. But make no doubt about it, to the opportunities that we have before us, where we have opportunity to have an influence on a child or a grandchild or a neighbor or a friend, to what degree we have that level of influence, church, we must seize that moment. Because Jesus said, whoever welcomes me doesn't just welcome me, welcomes the one who sent me. Now, if you go back down to Mark 9, verse 42, we're also going to get this huge warning. And that huge warning that's offered there, Jesus is going to say, if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them if a large millstone were hung around their neck and they were thrown into the sea. Church, let me tell you, we have a great responsibility. And one of the best things I can tell us is to seize the moment, choose our words, and choose our actions wisely. We have a great opportunity before us. I close with this story. Dwight Morrow was holding one of those big fancy wingding parties, okay? And at this particular party, Calvin Coolidge was one of those that was invited to attend. After Coolidge left, Morrow told the others, he said that, well, I believe that Coolidge would make a good president. But there were a lot of people that were there that day that they had watched Calvin Coolidge throughout the evening, and they said, we just don't think that he's a good candidate for president. We don't think that he's outgoing enough. He doesn't have enough color. He doesn't have enough personality, charisma to be able to be elected president. And so they're sitting here, and that conversation has started, and it's gotten quite ugly. And at that point, Dwight Morrow's 6-year-old daughter, Anne, stood up and got everybody's attention. And what she told him, she told the group, she said, I like him. Then she held up a finger and had a small bandage on it. She said he was the only one at the party who asked about my sore finger. And her father added, and that's why he would make a good president. Because he was a man who noticed the small things, who sought to make a difference perhaps in the child that nobody else would talk to. I think, church, about us and the opportunity we have to serve others, that as we go, we are looking for opportunities to do, whether it's small things or great things, to help other people, but it gives glory to God. Whenever we look at serving others, of seeing others, that their needs take a precedent over our wants at the time. Church, what a great opportunity for us. I think about the way that we receive children, the way that we treat children, and what a great opportunity it is for us, for the church today, but also for the church of the future. We have a wonderful opportunity before us. And the only question I ask us today is, will we seize the moment, or will we gravitate to excuses that we've used for decades? You know, there may be some of us here this morning that aren't Christians. If you're a child and you're growing up and you're learning about Jesus, man, that's a great thing. I hope you'll take the opportunity to keep learning. And when you get to that point that you look and you realize you're ready to make that decision to be baptized into Christ, I hope that you'll make it. And even if it's today, I hope that you'd make it. But for those of us that are adults that may not have given our lives to Christ, I just simply ask, what are you waiting for? The true path to greatness begins by naming Jesus as Lord and Savior. For others of us, maybe we just need to be reminded of that set of priorities in life and of keeping things in order, of the importance of serving, the importance of having the attitude of a servant, and the importance of looking to help others that society may overlook. If we can help you this morning, whether to come to Christ or to rededicate your life to Him, we want to invite you to come to the front. Let's stand and let's sing.